Okay, we are going to continue on with our program. We're going to have Valerie Watson is going to come and talk about what's happening in our colleges. As Ruth mentioned earlier, we have identified vulnerable populations, and it's because of the work that we are doing that those vulnerable populations have a chance to have their votes and the integrity of their votes restored. The amazing thing, I have to tell you, it is absolutely amazing as we have put eyes on the process to see the corruption that is taking place in the election process in California. It's mind-numbing almost. However, that's okay because you can't solve a problem till you know what it is. And so I'm going to have Valerie come up and tell you about that one particular problem. Valerie? Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Shannon, thank you so much for those words. It's wonderful to have that as an introduction and a place to level set, really, what this is all about. Thank you again, Shannon. Thank you, Rob. Well, as Linda mentioned, in Santa Barbara, we organized for the first time for the primary in 2012, and with a small number of people went to several different polling areas, but one of which was the University of California at Santa Barbara. And one of the reasons that we focused on that area was that in the 2008 election, there were verified election results which showed several precincts that had well over 100% counted turnout in each of those precincts. In fact, one of the precincts had as much as 130% qualified turnout that was counted. So knowing that and having a candidate who had been through the 2008 race and was now coming towards the 2012 primary for the same seat, we decided to go out to that area. So November, we used Linda's training for the election integrity. We had just shy of 100 people who were willing to spend the entire day with us at the university. Well, the university is a place for education, and boy, did we get one. As we stood, we had heard, of course, anecdotes about what we thought was happening out at the university, and people threw up their hands and said, well, we don't know what to say, but we saw this. So now with a trained group of volunteers, what we can say is that we actually witnessed many of the things that Linda has put in that report, which I'll welcome all of you to please take one of the copies of the report so you have an idea of what the primary voter irregularities were that happened across the state of California. And here in our area, I'll share with you exactly what we saw, or at least some of what we saw at the university. The first thing that did happen was that it wasn't as though we saw groups and groups of people who seemed to be wanting to do bad things. That wasn't the case at all. To mirror exactly what both Linda and Ruth have said, that really the people who work at those polls are honest people who are doing their very best to do a good job to ensure a fair and honest election and to treat each voter with dignity and integrity. However, many of those poll workers were inadequately trained, and that became very evident very, very quickly. Some of them actually took good coaching from the observers. Some of them were resistant, as we could understand, but inadequate poll worker training was absolutely evident, and particularly in these polls where in this very small place there are almost 20,000 registered voters. So you can imagine that in less than a square mile you had almost 20,000 people who might show up to vote, and so it got crowded quick, and inadequacies in training became very evident very quickly. But one of the things that we did see that did have a sense of some wrongdoing was that there did seem to be people who seemed to be coaching and guiding those students towards the polls. And it happened repeatedly, and it happened from one poll to the next. And where it was most evident was in the freshman dorms and in the dining halls. We would see groups of people show up with an older representative taking them to the polls, lining them up, and talking to them as they stood in line ready to enter the polling place. That was discouraging. In addition, of course, the voter list that hangs outside of the poll places was studied with great interest as people made cell phone calls directly from looking at that list, only to have a large number of people show up at the polls. One thing that was true inside of the university setting and was most concerning to us was that at the university setting, it's a foregone conclusion that many of the voters there will be first-time voters in a national election. And HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, very clearly states anyone who is a first-time voter in a national election is required to show identification. Not one student at the university was asked for identification. And again, that points to a problem and something that needs to be addressed immediately. Another thing, and again, without making a mountain out of a molehill, observations were made at several of the polls where students would show up and say, "I must have an I voted sticker," and we ran out of them. So the poll worker would kindly say, "I'm sorry, we don't have any more of those stickers." "Well, you need to sign something for me that says I voted." Well, when asked why, "Well, I just need to have proof." Well, again, that's discouraging. One of the issues that Ruth mentioned was provisional voting. So again, in a very small area, again, a university campus and the immediate area around that, provisional voting was not just a problem, it was epidemic. It was well over 40% of the votes that were, the ballots that were cast on election day were provisional ballots. And again, without understanding precisely why that was happening, what we can tell you is that observer after observer noted that students actually came in and insisted on getting a provisional ballot. They would not go to their own polling place. They insisted on going to that one and filling out a provisional ballot. So they actually would come up and say, "I'm here for my provisional ballot." Again, we're only making assumptions about things, and we don't want to make we certainly don't want to say that these young voters are trying to do anything that looks illegal. But unfortunately, that really wasn't following the process, and it did create a lot of chaos at the university setting. And we got a very, very high turnout, once again, at the university setting. So with all that said, I think that, you know, our day out at the polls, we had many young people, many students who actually participated in the poll observation, and it was a real eye-opener for them. For our team in Santa Barbara, I think it gave everyone there a sense of real purpose and meaning to have an opportunity to participate on Election Day in this way. And certainly I've heard people say again and again that they're absolutely excited about the opportunity to do this again and can't wait to support EIP through all of its efforts here in Sacramento and around the state. So let me say thank you again to all of you who participated, and it's a pleasure to be able to share some of our findings with this. And one of the things I did also want to say is I noted this yesterday as Linda and I were driving up to Sacramento, was that, of course, yesterday was the anniversary of MLK's speech, where what he really espoused was the idea of a man's character and his focus and efforts being the determiner of his life. What I witnessed at the university was a lot of manipulation of young people. And with that, I think we can clearly call that really a vulnerable population, and our education in that area has to really improve. So thank you very much, and I'm going to go ahead and give this back to Ruth.
Thank you, Valerie.